Channel Sports Central will be going over our next schedule preview this 2020 offseason, and it will be over the Michigan State Spartans, which was a team that ended up going 7-6 in 2019. Overall, it was a bit of a tough season for Michigan State, but nonetheless, how will they do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over a few players this team will be losing, who they're going to be returning, and also going over their schedule for the first time this offseason. But starting off with the games that Michigan State has had since November. Of course, on November 9th, they lost to Illinois 34-37, and that was really certainly the toughest loss of this season for Michigan State. I mean, losing to Illinois, certainly you've got no excuses for losing to them. They did lose to Michigan the next week, 10-44 on the road. That was a big blowout loss. But however, they finished off the season quite well. They did beat Rutgers and Maryland, two of the bottom teams in the Big Ten. But they were able to shut out Rutgers and also beat Maryland, so that was good. Then they beat Wake Forest in their bowl game, 27-21. So overall for Michigan State, finishing off the season well against a Wake Forest team that certainly had a pretty great 2019 season. It was pretty impressive. But nonetheless, the trend for Michigan State was pretty inconsistent in 2019. They were 4-4 between September and October, as well as 3-2 between November and the postseason. Looking at the returning production for Michigan State, they do lose their starting quarterback Brian Lewerke after this 2019 season, and of course he was a big part of the team, had over 3,000 yards of passing this past season, as well as 17 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. So his touchdown-interception ratio was not very good at all, but his yardage was really good, over 3,000 yards of passing, so certainly it'll be a big change to have Lewerke not under center next season. They returned their freshman running back Elijah Collins, which had over 1,000 yards of total offense, as well as 5 touchdowns. And they do also lose their top receiver Cody White, which he was also another big part of this team. He had over 900 yards and 6 touchdowns too. So, losing your top receiver in Cody White, that's going to be a big loss. But they also lose their second receiver in Darrell Stewart, who had just over 700 yards of offense as well as 4 touchdowns, and they lose their tight end Matt Sabert, which had over 200 yards as well as 3 touchdowns, and they also returned their third wide receiver Trey Mosley. So that's the best wide receiver that they're returning this going into next season, which he had over 200 yards and 1 touchdown though as well. So he didn't have a lot of experience this season. So really this receiving core is going to need a little bit of work going into 2020. But the running back core looks pretty good with Elijah Collins coming back. Once again, he was a running back that rushed for over 1,000 yards this season. Really, I think they'll be just fine at the running back position, but really there are lots of uncertainties on this offense going into 2020. They also lose 1 offensive lineman, 3 defensive linemen, and 1 linebacker, and also 2 in the secondary on defense. So they lose 6 defensive starters, and that's going to be tough to deal with. Typically, from most teams, you'll see maybe 3, possibly 4 losses on the defense. For Michigan State, they got 6, so you're losing quite a bit on the defense, and that certainly is a bit concerning for me. And they also have a new head coach in Mel Tucker. Of course, a couple weeks ago, Mark D'Antonio decided to step down, which makes this 2020 season even more intriguing for me for Michigan State. I mean, it's going to be this is a really tough team to predict going into 2020, no doubt about it. I think they're going to be one of the toughest teams to predict this entire offseason, no doubt. I mean, when you're losing a quarterback like Brian Lewerke and then losing your top receivers and as well as your top tight end and 6 in the defense, I mean, all the keys add up for Michigan State to have a bit of a rebuilding season next year. And I'm sure most people are expecting that out of Michigan State right now. And looking at their schedule for the first time in 2020, and we are looking at their first game being September 5th against Northwestern. And of course, Northwestern really did not have a very good 2019 season. I do expect them to be better in 2020, but I do think Michigan State certainly could win that game with it being at home too. But otherwise, looking at your non-conference, you got BYU and Toledo as well as Miami. So that Miami game should be interesting. But yeah, certainly very winnable once again for Michigan State. Looking at the conference schedule, it's pretty tough for Michigan State. You got Iowa on the road, Michigan and Ohio State in 3 straight weeks, as well as an Indiana trip that certainly won't be easy, along with Minnesota and Penn State. So you've got a 6 or 7 game stretch in there that is certainly going to be very brutal. Like this October is going to be extremely challenging for Michigan State, so you got to watch out for that. But yeah, Rutgers and Maryland certainly are your 2 most winnable conference games, and they're at the end of the season. So I mean, it worked out pretty well for Michigan State this past season. Of course, they were 4 and I believe 6 heading into their last 2 games of the season, and they ended up beating Rutgers and Maryland, which led them to a bowl game at 6-6. So overall for Michigan State, Once again, though, this is a much tougher schedule, in my opinion, this year than they had last year. But nonetheless, here's what I'm expecting. I'm only going to give you 3 wins right now for Michigan State. I think they beat Northwestern, Toledo, and Rutgers. Nonetheless, I'm not going to give you wins against BYU and Miami quite yet, because BYU, with it being on the road, could be a challenge, and then Miami, of course, being at home, and Miami could be a big improved team next season, who knows. But I will give you a projected loss, and that will be to Penn State on the road. I just don't think that's going to happen there, especially with Penn State being a team that I expect to possibly have a chance at winning the Big Ten next season. I don't think Penn State will be a very winnable game. But once again, with having Michigan and Ohio State at home, who knows? I mean, an upset could happen there easily. Be a record estimation for Michigan State is going to be 5-7 to 7-5. I don't expect anything crazy for Michigan State next season. I think a bowl game is highly likely, but I wouldn't be surprised either to see Michigan State on the outside looking in if they finish off the regular season 5-7. But nonetheless, yeah, we'll go over every one of these games going into the summer. Of course, that'll be our actual prediction. Of course, we're in just the later parts of February right now, so it's too early to predict every single game for Michigan State right now. We'll be able to learn more once we get past spring. But nonetheless, yeah, for Michigan State, I'm expecting 5-7 to 7-5 right now. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Michigan State. Also, let me know your record predictions, your schedule predictions as well. But yeah, thank you guys all for sticking around. Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.